Greetings, everybody. I am Abby Holcomb. I'm the president of United Voices for Children, and we're excited to have you here tonight. You are here this evening because you have a heart for kids. We're thankful that you're joining us for this training led by Children's Advocates for Change. We continue our focus addressing advocacy for youth mental health issues and the resources that lend support to the children in our communities. You're going to hear some important information this evening. Some might be new to you, and some might be good reminders. We welcome our guests, our policy partners, Children's Advocates for Change, Dr. Tasha Green-Cruzat and Imani Pittman. Also, Tina Samuel, who is the Chief of Staff for Representative Kevin Olickle, Nicole Davidson, therapist at Rosecrance, and the National Alliance on Mental Health, NAMI. From them, we welcome Tony Olhausen and Sarah Gray. And I'm going to turn it over to our Vice President, Catherine and Sarah.
Thanks, Abby. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here on such a beautiful day. We have a lot of information and resources to share. We have a very solid program for you this evening. And like Abby said, we're so grateful that you're here. You know, the landscape of human services continues to change. I know I don't have to tell you that. And we have so many challenges, and yet we have so many opportunities in front of us to step up for our kids and our families. And that's why you're here today. And this information will live on because we are recording it. Because we have so much good information to share, I am just going to leave it at that and invite you to open your ears, open your hearts, open your minds, and let's see what we're going to learn together. And I'm going to turn it over to Imani Pittman and Dr. Tasha Green-Cruzat so we can hear about policy and data. Here we go.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. We're just getting set up with the slide deck, so hopefully you all can see it okay on your end. All right,
we can see the slide deck. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Well, good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Tasha Green-Cruzat. I'm president of Children's Advocates for Change, and I'm joined by Dr. Imani Pittman. She is the Children's Advocates for Change Public Policy Impact Partner. And we are both proud to present the 2025 data book, The Well-Being of Illinois Children, but we're going to specifically focus on the mental health crisis. Here at Children's Advocates for Change, our guiding principle is putting children first in policy and in legislation. Our work in Springfield and DC, it's not just about numbers, it's about policy efforts steeped in data, but refined by real life stories of our families. So our current agenda is focused on high impact changes, improving the Illinois Child Tax Credit, increasing rent relief, and the focus of today's session, expanding youth mental health resources. This data book provides the factual foundation for our leaders to make the best possible decisions for our state's future. To understand the scale of this challenge, we must take a look at the population that we are currently serving here in Illinois. There are currently 2,814,642 children under the age of 18 in our state. And while approximately 2.8 of these children live in households, the age distribution is relatively even across the board, with our largest cohorts, those aged 12 to 17, totaling nearly 1 million adolescents. As we move through the mental health data, keep this scale in mind. These percentages represent hundreds of thousands of individual lives. I'm going to hand it now over to Dr. Imani Pittman.
Alrighty. Thank you, Dr. Tasha. So, kind of building on that overview, I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes walking us through what the data tells us specifically about youth mental health in Illinois, and more importantly, what these trends mean for the young people that we work with, the families, and the homes that they reside in, and the systems that we work within. So now when we look at mental health more directly, one statistic I think really kind of anchors this conversation, and that is about 1 in 5 children in Illinois, or 22.5%, have at least one mental, emotional, developmental, or behavioral concern. And I kind of want to pause here for a second on that because, to Tasha's point, sometimes when we hear percentages, they don't necessarily land. But when you kind of translate that into real life, into real experiences, we're thinking about students that are in classrooms, we're thinking about children that are in after school programs, and we're thinking about caseloads for our direct service providers. And so that's young people that we're interacting with and young people that we know. I think
Okay,
what's also
just
important here. Oh,
Dr. Bonnie, just a quick pause. I understand that there is some technical difficulty with seeing the slides. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think they're not advancing.
okay. Let's see. What
I
slide
think
are
we
you
see the
guys seeing?
window of your slides, but we don't see the presentation, maybe a slideshow of them.
Okay. Let's see if we could get that quickly fixed.
Sure.
There we go. Let's see. Okay. Are you guys able to see it now? Is that a little better?
Yeah, it's a new slide. It's the Illinois Youth Mental Health. Yeah.
Perfect. That's where we want to be.
Okay.
Okay. I will get back started. Sorry about those technical difficulties. I think what I was saying was that when it comes to these statistics, particularly that 22.5% of children ages 3 to 17 that are experiencing a mental, emotional, developmental, or behavioral problem, I think it's important here also to note that this isn't evenly distributed. When you looked at the breakdowns on the right, you start to see variation across racial and ethnic groups. And while the numbers may differ, what we know from both data and practice is that some communities, are facing higher exposure to stressors, while others are facing greater barriers to diagnosis and care, especially when we think about some of the more rural counties in Illinois. So in many ways, I think the data is telling us two things simultaneously, one of which is that the need is widespread in Illinois, and the second is that the experience of that need is not being experienced equally. And so both of these realities, I think, require different responses to the issues that our youth are facing. So now data helps us to.
After the pandemic, we saw an uptick in behaviors.
One second, we'll get started with that. So data kind of helps give us an overview of the experience that are happening for Illinois youth, but we also at Children's Advocates for Change think that it's important to also use testimonies and positionality and lived experience from folks to really help kind of ground the conversation and make sure that we understand the lived experience of the numbers that we're talking about. So here we have Kiwana W., who's a Head Start Education and Disabilities Coordinator, talking about her experience specifically with early childhood counseling and early childhood mental health.
After the pandemic, we saw an uptick in behaviors. We saw an uptick in referrals. We just saw a lot of social, emotional issues. And then it began to wear on our teachers. We have kids who are jumping off the tables and trying to run out of the doors. And it was like a little ring of chaos. Children who possibly aren't able to self-regulate, who've been home with their families the entire pandemic, who've been wearing masks, who are not able to pick up on social cues, who are not responding to those normal things that we thought was typical behavior for 3 to 5-year-old children. So when the mental health piece was brought in, It helped our teachers who were able to bring in a new curriculum conscious discipline. We were able to give the children the skills to cope.
Oh, boy,
We were
I'm
able to
shaking.
see that
You're
child
shaking.
who
And
started in the
you gotta be
beginning
safe
of the
like,
school year,
oh,
who
I'm so glad I
cried
thought of
the
that.
entire day, who asked for mom or asked for dad, become the leader of the classroom, help their friends to manage their emotions, who practiced breathing techniques and did little calming activities with each other. So the mental health piece was vital for not only the children, but it was also very good for the teachers. It gave them some new tools for their toolkit and gave them new ways to handle stress.
And next, I'll pass it over to Reverend Jacob to read a testimony from Carlton S., who is a Head Start parent. Again, really highlighting the importance of mental health, but particularly for our smaller Illinoisans, and how that looks like for early childhood counseling.
It's good to have a consistent exposure, to other children her age to socialize with and build relationships. A lot of little things like that, I would not know how or what to teach my child at that age. I think they cover for me. From my perspective, you don't know what your child should know or how your child should act. I'm an adult. I'm a normal social person, and I don't have any concerns about my own social capabilities. But I'm a grown person. What is expected or what is normal for my child? What is expected of a 4-year-old? How are they expected to act at this age? My daughter, she's 4. She likes to play around a lot. Is she playing too much? I don't know. It seems like everything is going smoothly for me. But what foundation of understanding do I have? So Head Start and them doing the evaluation of the children's mental health and their social skills is amazing, especially when providing input if, in fact, my child is not, aligning with those expectations is tremendously helpful for me. Head Start provides that framework that I would not know much about without them.
Perfect. Thank you, Reverend Jacob. And so I think that those perspectives really highlight clearly that mental health isn't just an individual issue that's being experienced, but it's something that's showing up in classrooms. It's something that's showing up in family dynamics and across entire systems. So really just exemplifying that point. Moving away from our younger Illinoisans to more of our adolescents, mental health, the data I think becomes even more urgent. In 2023, about 19% of Illinois high school students seriously considered attempting suicide. That is nearly 1 in 5 young people. And while there has been a slight decline from 2021, the longer term trends tells a different story. And this represents, I believe, a significant increase over time. Another point here is the disparity that we're seeing in this statistic. Female students are reporting suicide ideation at more than twice the rate of male students. So again, we're seeing that while this is a widespread issue, it's not experienced uniformly. And I think what's important is this isn't just about crisis intervention, especially when it's coming to suicide ideation. This is about prevention. This is about early identification. This is about creating environments where young people feel supported before they reach this point. And then when we look at actual suicide attempts, we see a similar and concerning pattern. The percentages of high school students who have attempted suicide has increased from 6.8 to nearly 10% over time, and we're seeing a 44% increase. Again, when we look across groups, as you can see here on the right side, we're seeing differences by race, we're seeing differences by grade level, and we're also seeing differences by gender. So what this tells us is that we're not just dealing with thoughts, we're dealing with something that's translating into action, which I think continuously reinforces this need for accessible services, for school-based supports, and for a system that can respond quickly and adequately to the needs of our teen Illinoisans.
Dr. Amani, your slides are not forwarding. And that slide that you just talked about was really important. Can you take a second to
Yes, I sure can. Give me 1 second to try to get us
Because I know
set.
that slide, you worked on that slide and it's important to see it.
Yeah, thank you for stopping me, Catherine. I might show it this way. It's a little less, might not show up as full screen, but I want to make sure that the material that's being shown is able to be seen. So let's try this way. Is looking at it on my,
Eh,
is that a little bit better?
That I think that's the one you're at right now. Yeah. The attempting,
Yeah.
are you on the attempting suicide?
Yep,
Yeah.
I'm on suicide ideation. Is that better? Is that showing up for everyone?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm seeing some thumbs up. So again, kind of going back to what I was talking about here is again, really looking at the conversation that we started on the last slide when thinking about suicide ideation. When we look at actual suicide attempts, what we're seeing is that the percentage of students who have attempted suicide has increased from about 6.8 to nearly 10% over time. And what we're seeing is differences amongst genders, we're seeing differences amongst grades, and we're also seeing differences amongst race and ethnicity, which I think again kind of reinforces the conversation that we need accessible services, we need school-based supports, and we need systems that can respond quickly and appropriately and in a way that is needed for these different demographics that are experiencing these ideation and these attempts in very different ways. So moving along to cyberbullying, I think another important factor that's shaping youth mental health, especially for adolescents, is our ever-changing digital environment. Nearly half of teens, or about 46%, report experiencing cyberbullying. And we know that prolonged experience of cyberbullying is linked to anxiety, depression, and other stress-related challenges. Now, when we look specifically at Illinois data, which is on this next slide here, we're seeing that about 16.8 of high school students are reporting being electronically bullied. And while that number has significantly decreased from previous years, we still believe that it is significant because unlike traditional bullying, this bullying doesn't stop when the student leaves school, right? It follows them into their homes, it follows them into their phones, and it follows them into spaces that we have traditionally thought is safe for our students. So when we talk about mental health, we also have to talk about the environment and then increasingly now the digital environment. So when we take a step back and look at all of this, what we're seeing is a high prevalence of need, increasing severity in some areas, and persistent disparities amongst groups. And we're also seeing a growing awareness and a real opportunity, I think, to respond differently. So with that, I'll pass it back to Dr. Tasha to walk us through what this means for policy and systems.
Thank you, Dr. Mani. Well, Illinois is certainly fighting back with some active legislation. So there is Anne Marie's Law, which ensures the suicide awareness is taught in schools. That's Public Act 102-0416, which now requires crisis resources like the 988 Lifeline to be printed on every student ID card. So looking ahead, the Beacon portal launched in early 2025 now provides universal, no-cost mental health screening for public school students. Governor Pritzker's FY 27 budget continues to fund these critical policies, and his proposed social media platform fee aims to generate $200 million annually, specifically for children's mental health. Well, that tax is targeting for-profit social media platforms with greater than 100,000 Illinois users, and we are currently monitoring litigation out there. It's Net Choice versus the City of Chicago to see if such fees survive the federal internet tax freedom challenges. So we will continue to keep our eye on that. Next slide. We just want to thank you so very much. You will find a short infographic of today's material. It'll be made available for you after this presentation. And then there's also a QR code that you can scan so that you don't have to print that voluminous data book. You can get it right, download it right from our website. So we thank you very, very much for listening to us today.
And I think with that, next we're going to hear from Tina Samuel.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Tina Samuel, Chief of Staff to State Representative Kevin Olicle. Our office represents the 16th House District, which covers most of Skokie, all of Lincolnwood, and parts of the 40th and 50th wards of Chicago, from Westridge all the way down to Edgewater. Representative Olicle unfortunately couldn't join us today as he's out of town, but he sends his regards, and I'm here to give a quick update on two pieces of legislation that are focused on supporting mental health in our schools and communities, SB 1560 and 4714. SB 1516, which was carried by Senator Feigenholt and Representative LaPointe, with Representative Olicle as co-sponsor, includes two major changes. First, starting in the 2027 to 2028 school year, all school districts will be required to offer mental health screenings to students in grades 3 through 12, at least once per year. And the second change requires the Illinois State Board of Education to provide schools with the resources they need to implement these screenings, including model policies and guidance, by September 1st of this year. This is a major step forward in supporting mental health of students across the state and was signed into law last August. Now, HB 4714, carried by Representative Wolf Davis, recently passed out of the Mental Health and Addiction Committee. This bill strengthens the Children's Mental Health Partnership and expands youth and community representation. The most effective way to support this bill is to contact your own representatives and urge them to support and co-sponsor the bill. Hearing directly from constituents helps legislators understand the impact these policies have on our communities and guides their decisions in committee and on the House floor. This is especially important as members will be returning to session next week to work on passing their bills out of the House as the third reading deadline approaches. For any questions or follow-up, you can always reach out to our office. I'll put our contact info into the chat, and I'll be here for the Q&A if anyone has any other questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Tina, for being here and for that information. And now that we've kind of laid this important foundation, and I know we're glad that a lot's being done on the legislative level. As a Rosecrance employee myself, I'm honored to introduce Nicole Davidson, a colleague of mine. She is our community-based services supervisor for the Greater Rockford region, and she holds a MSW and is a licensed clinical social worker. And Nicole is here to share with us some important information on how we can talk to our kids and talk to youth about some hard things. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to Nicole Davidson.
Thank you, Shannon. I am going to share my screen really quick with everyone so you guys can see my PowerPoint. Give me 1 second. All right. All right. Can everyone see that? Awesome. So like I said, thank you, Shannon. And I think everything that was just spoken prior to this is definitely a great way to lead into this conversation on how we do help youth navigate all the current things that are happening in our world, including obviously mental health, social media pressures, and really any other constant stream of information that our youth are seeing through peer conversations or through social media, the news, whatever it may be. It's really all over the place, especially because of the increase of media usage. So going into my first slide, I really like to focus first on the conversation of supporting youth in a complex, informative environment. So how can we do that as adults who are around youth? So youth's nervous systems move into threat states when they are basically living in fear or fearful about something. They process stress through relationships, not just information. So when I say that, it's really the idea that the adults are the ones who are going to model what that behavior looks like. And if you are someone who also processes stress in a way that it can be seen. A lot of our youth can feel that, and they will feel a very similar feeling. So we just want to be mindful that when we are trying to have these difficult conversations with youth, that we are presenting ourselves in a calm state way, so it gets them out of that threat state as well. A big piece about having these conversations with youth is co-regulation. It helps them return them to safety. I know we talked a lot about prior to this in videos how so many youth are very much dysregulated, and it's definitely been an increase that we have seen in our youth, unfortunately. But I think this conversation of how we can continue to support them is huge. So why does this all matter? Just those three basic bullet points that I touch base on is really, as you guys know, it increases their mental health symptoms. So really addressing that early on is huge to really catch them and give them support so it doesn't impact their daily functioning kind of moving forward. It also helps process complex or evolving information. So really we want to process with them. We want to talk about it with them. I think a lot of people have a myth that if we have difficult conversations about something going on in the world, that it will make the youth think more about it and it'll make them more fearful. When really in reality, talking about it with them and sitting with them and validating their feelings is really what keeps them at a steady pace and able to have that conversation and feel safe. Moving on to our next piece. So use developmentally appropriate information. So I put this slide on here because it really breaks down the concept of the different age ranges on how we can talk to our youth, because it obviously is a little bit different for each kiddo. So young children often imagine something worse than reality really is. And then the big focus on ages 5 to 8, what we see is really focusing on safety and reassurance. And a lot of times that can just be short, clear explanations. It doesn't need to be a novel. That can actually put more, instill fear in them if it continues to be a long story. And you're really just sticking to the here and now. So just being present with them. I think some ideas of what I like to say or what to say is something scary happened far away, but you're safe here with me, is something of like an example of reassurance for our littles that we like to use. Some of the helpful techniques also that we use for our littles is really, again, validating and normalizing that sounds scary if they mention something that is bothering them or they're being cyberbullied and that conversation gets brought up. And kind of normalizing that, like, a lot of kids feel this way, depending on the conversation, can be a good way to have those conversation starters with them. And a big thing is really clarifying with them what are their safe spaces. So your home is safe. If school's safe for them, that's your safe space. And the adults are here to protect you. So those are our littles. The preteens, they really want clear facts, but limited exposure. Again, we don't really want to have a ton of specifics for them. But you're really just saying what happened, what's being done, and how they can stay safe. So as you can tell, these are very similar techniques to use with our youth, is ensuring safety and validating and emphasizing with them. What do we do? Ask what they already know first. I think that's something that we like to say, so we don't assume that we know what they're thinking. Correct any misinformation gently with them if they are wrong, because like I said in the beginning, it can always come off a little bit worse than reality. And really limiting the exposure. So if we're talking specifically with social media and that's impacting our youth, really trying to limit and set boundaries with that is huge for them. So they can understand boundaries and have that structure on when it is safe to be on social media and what to be looking at. So teens benefit from discussion and perspective and empowerment. So really at that age 12 and above, that's really at that time of growth that they are curious and like to feel empowered and make decisions, have really the hard conversations, but still making it a safe space for them is a huge way to address it. So things like, what have you been hearing online? Tell me more. How does that make you feel? What do you think about it? And then what questions do you have? So you're really just leaving the floor open for them, which I think is what is important, that you're not trying to dismiss or hide anything. And again, it's a big validation piece of some of what's online isn't accurate. Let's look at it together. So really being side by side with them if it is something online or it is just something that's happening at home or in school that they just want someone safe to talk to. The other thing I like to express when being specific of like validating emotions as a therapist, you say like, oh, I understand what you're feeling, but at the same time, we don't want to come across in that way, right? Because we don't fully understand if we haven't been through that. So again, a lot of people feel worried about this. It makes sense that you feel this way. And then a technique that we use, at least in therapy, is reflective listening. So telling them and saying, so you're feeling nervous because you saw that video. And then it kind of opens the floor for them to have that conversation and really try and take in oh, so you are listening to what I'm saying. And you're saying that I do feel nervous, and I do. Validation isn't necessarily agreeing with them. You're really just acknowledging what they're expressing to us. Some other things that I will touch base on too is this idea of like limited exposure. As we know, the world that we live in, our youth are on the phone a lot. And it's something that even the schools really struggle with right now is really even keeping that boundary and keeping them off media exposure. We're really still trying to identify in therapy too, like how long are you on social media? How long are you looking at these things? And again, limiting it. So what to do, really what we do in therapy is watch or review content with them when possible, because you're really just trying to find the facts and the discussion and their perspective and set boundaries around the repeated exposure. That's a huge thing. As we know with youth, we have to have an open conversation to set those safe boundaries for them. I think some things that you guys can take away being the adults meeting with the youth, what we like to say to them is, let's just take a break from this a bit. It doesn't have to be a big negative consequence that, hey, you've been on this for too long and something bad happened from it. But really just kind of validating and educating that like watching this over and over can make it feel closer or scarier than it is, because this is something that you continue to see. And it's really just teaching them and educating them. We're not trying to dismiss again what they're feeling or what's going on. I think the other thing that I'll touch base on before I move on to my next slide, because that one's really our last informational page. One of the things that I was going to talk about is really big coping skills that we like to give to kiddos in our services. So these are just some practical tools for talking with kids. And this is mostly for you guys. So starting with curiosity, ask what the child has already heard, clarify the misinformation, validate emotions, and we're normalizing fear and sadness or even confusion. And then, like I said before, a big technique in this is using reflective listening. So really ensuring that you are at the level with them and reflecting on what they're stating, because then they really do know you're listening, because you're basically repeating back what they said they felt in the moment. As I said before, we're going to limit and process media exposure, encourage breaks, and then the coping skill piece. I feel like if, as all of you probably know, there's a lot of coping skills in this world. I mean, anything can turn into a coping skill. So I always just like to teach that, like, it doesn't have to be this big tactical technique that they use that will help them. A lot of times we like to use grounding exercises with youth because it helps a lot with that emotional dysregulation. So we have a technique called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique, where really they just stop in the moment and they identify the 5 senses. So 5 things they can see, 4 things hear, taste, sound, and smell. And just having them use that in a moment if they are anxious in school and they're feeling overwhelmed, or someone bothered them in the hallway and they got into the classroom and now they just feel shaken up, they can use this skill easily without other people noticing that they're using this in school. So that could be a helpful tactic, because a lot of times our youth like to think that, well, so-and-so is going to see me doing that and it's embarrassing, which is very much a real thing. I'm sure we've all felt that. So validating again and saying, well, this one's a little bit more secretive, you can do it in your head type of deal is a good one. Of course, we have our deep breathing techniques. I think kiddos a lot of times in therapy with me will mess around and be like, I'm not just going to stop and take 3 big deep breaths. So I always just mess and say, well, you can do in for 4, out for 4, and we'll do it together and normalize that feeling. I know we did a little exercise prior to our presentation today, and I love those exercises when we do it together, because you're just teaching them again that like this doesn't have to be an odd thing, that we're doing deep breathing. And it does help calm some of those symptoms of anxiety for sure for our kiddos. So I think in the biggest point, and you can telling them in the conversations that you're providing coping skills, we can slow this down together. Let's help your body feel calmer. They're really just short, sweet sentences to just say that you're here and you're listening is a huge key. My last thing that I put on here was encouraging open and ongoing conversations. I mean, this is just what it is, and it's reality that we do want to encourage those conversations with our youth. We don't necessarily want to pry things out of them, because that can also put them in a state of fear, or just feeling threatened, or feeling like they have to share something, and it might not even be what they're really feeling or wanting to talk about. So just encouraging, like, do you want to talk about that? And if they want to, perfect. That's a great time that you can get down with them, sit on a couch, be at their level, and just say, so tell me what you've seen, and how can I help clarify some things that maybe you misinterpreted or didn't know, is really a big piece for them. I think a big thing about encouraging ongoing conversations too is keep the door open, not a one and done conversation, because a lot of times these can be hard conversations, especially with youth. As adults, we fear for their safety, and we fear overall for their mental health. So again, it's that state that you're the role model in that situation. If you show fear, they will feel fear. So just being able to also check yourself and take a step back and say, when is a good time to have a hard conversation with them, to kind of help them process through all the things they might be willing to share with you. And I think another thing is incorporating breaks with them. So they do like to take kind of like a timeout break if it feels like the conversation's getting too hard, or you can just say, do you want to take 5 minutes and we can come back to the conversation? And maybe they don't. And that's okay too. You can open that up again and encourage it and say, hey, do you want to finish that conversation that we didn't finish the other day? I think is a huge takeaway for that. And realistically, youth process over time. They don't just do it in the moment like us as adults a lot of times. And some of us aren't even that great at it either. So they don't process everything in just one conversation. It does take them time to see and reflect and kind of learn from what we're giving them within those difficult conversations. So I will say one simple takeaway framework that's a little more memorable for you guys. You can ask, affirm, answer, and anchor. So this is one little skill that we use when we say ask what they know, affirm their feelings, answer simply and honestly, and then anchor them back to safety. I think the conversation at the end always has to end with safety. And that could be a good little takeaway for the kiddos and yourselves. So before we kind of go into a Q&A, because I feel like I talked a little bit fast, I do have a few more key things that I thought about that might be broader questions of like, hey, so when should I seek professional help? This is one that we get a lot of, like, what are the signs? And a lot of times it could be a lot of things. So I don't think there's a black and white answer. I think if you're noticing that your child's distress is ongoing and it's intensifying, and you're seeing their behavior patterns are changing and it's really interfering with their daily life, and that could be sleep and school, or maybe their relationships, and they stop being friends with their close friend, or they start hanging around a different group of peers that could have a different influence on them. I think that could be a good time where you kind of reach out. School counselor, you could start with reaching out to the school and seeing if a social worker or counselor can meet with the kiddo. If school really is being impacted, please utilize the resources that the school offers, such as the IEPs or 504 plans. Those have been really helpful for kiddos who struggle with anxiety or depression, really any of those, because of that fear of being in the hallways with a lot of people and really just having extra support. So utilizing those resources within the schools is a big one. And of course, mental health professionals, reaching out for counseling, and if that's something they're ready to do. is a big one as well, because at the end of the day, that is all voluntarily on them if they're willing to talk to someone. But really normalizing that help seeking for them too. It can be very scary for a youth to have to go and share with someone if they're struggling. So getting support early is a strength, not a failure. Kind of that same language of you're giving safety and you're validating and normalizing with them. So they really understand that it's okay. Trying to think if there was two others. I did bring up that what if I make it worse by bringing it up to youth? Because I've had adults say, I really want to have this conversation with them. I know they're struggling because of all of this that's going on around the world. And I always just say that most kids are already hearing all the things happening, whether that is online or in school. So if we don't bring it up, they often fill in the gaps with their imagination. So it is okay to talk about it and help contain the fear. And again, we can't pry it out of them, but if they're willing to have that conversation, know that you can ask and it's not going to make it worse by bringing it up. I think the two other ones I was going to touch point before we go to Q&As was, how do you know if it's serious or just normal worry? So this is one that's kind of like a gray area. It's normal for kids to feel worried. It's normal for them to feel sad or angry or confused by all the events that are happening in our world. So knowing that, what we watch for is how long it lasts. So that almost goes back to how I said, when it's time to seek help, it's really when those behaviors and relationships are being impacted and it's really impacting their daily functioning. That's when we know that we need some extra support to really try and allow them to have a stable life and get the help that they need. And then the other one was, what if my child won't talk about it? Which is very common. I think a lot of times we want to hear all the things that they're going through. And I know I've said it probably 100 times. We just don't want to pry it out of them. It's common that they don't want to talk about it. And not all kids even process by talking. You could do even an exercise with them that says, hey, do you want to write it in a journal? And I can read it and I will write you back. You don't even have to talk to them about it back. I think we have to be creative in how we do communicate with our youth now. We shared prior that because of the pandemic, a lot of youth definitely have had impacts from that. And I think this is our way of learning and adapting to where they're at and their needs, because the techniques have changed. So whether it's them writing it down, you writing it down, or however they want to get creative with it, don't feel like you have to pry it out in a face-to-face conversation. And you can create those openings without pressure. Okay, moving on to questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. I know you answered even just in your presentation some of the questions that I had, but I'll read one from the chat here that says, how can our churches move beyond being places of worship to becoming trusted and accessible resources for family? And how must our youth ministries adapt to meet the real emotional and psychological needs of this generation? So we can kind of chunk that up a little bit to how can maybe churches go beyond just being places of worship to really becoming a place where they can be trusted and accessible resources for the families that belong there.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great question and just another place of support. I don't know if I necessarily have like a 100% right answer for that. I think if we open the door for youth to explore that avenue, if that's a strength that they have, if it is church, if it is worship, really ensuring that, hey, this is your safe space. And is there a trusted adult there where you feel like you can talk to someone? Because it doesn't have to be in traditional one-on-one counseling. A lot of our support comes from within our community and our safe spaces that we go within our community. So I think maybe it even is having churches go and talk to the schools. I don't know if that's something that could be of interest, is presenting on what your church offers or what even happens there, because I do think a lot of youth lack some of that education. And some may not, because traditionally their families grew up in their own church and their own faith and religion. So it could be putting your name out there and going presenting. And then it also could just be you creating a connection even with someone like Rosecrance or any mental health facility that's able to share that information to clients so they know what's available for them.
Awesome. And then another in the chat says there's a ton of info in the news about how social media is impacting our youth's mental health. They can't get away from it, especially if parents aren't molding best boundaries. Do you ever do family style therapy for how to manage social media? Everybody needs help. It's so addictive.
Yes, you are not wrong. We definitely do family style therapy and we most definitely encourage it. It is one of those things that it is a recommendation that we will make if we feel that the youth is not being set up for success or has enough support, based on what we're talking about in our therapy. But overall, family therapy for sure can help even educate the parents on what we just spoke on, because a lot of parents don't even know this information, nor do they know then if they're doing it right or in a supportive way to youth of like how to set best boundaries and in a way that it is supportive and not really like indictive. We don't want it to be a negative thing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Nicole, for all of that information that you've provided. A lot of really good tips there on how to talk to youth, how to provide safe spaces for them, leave, room for discussion and making sure that their feelings are validated and setting them up for success when it comes to modeling those coping skills. So we appreciate you being here, and all of the resources from Nicole that you just listened to will be available on the UVC website following this presentation as well. And it will be included in our follow-up email. So thank you, Nicole. And now we will continue on with our presentation here, and we'll hear from National Alliance on Mental Health. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Tony Olhausen and Sarah Gray.
Good evening. Let me just pull up our slides here quick, and then Sarah will get us kicked off. So just 1 second.
I think I have it. Can you guys see it pretty well? Can you see my screen?
Well, there you go. Yep, you're good to go.
Awesome.
Beat me to it, Sarah.
Yes. Yeah, it's there. Thank you.
You're welcome. So NAMI, Illinois is the statewide hub supporting 21 affiliates and expanding access to care across Illinois. We have grown from a small volunteer-led to a fully staffed team, increasing our capacity to serve communities statewide. Through state funding, grants, and donors, we provide free, evidence-based, peer-led programs with no eligibility barriers. Okay, so it's not advancing. I might be having the same thing. How's that? Can you see the next slide?
Yes.
All right, awesome. So on this slide, you'll see both my professional work and my personal journey. When I was at a local affiliate, I did a teen support group with a therapist in the green sweatshirt. Her name is Stephanie Burrell Hughes. She is going to graduate this May with her doctorate. But the other picture is a picture of me and my daughter. I'm a mom, and my journey began with NAMI when my daughter experienced a mental health crisis in college. But she had the words to ask for help because of the NAMI Ending the Silence program. And that moment changed everything. She walked right into a guidance counselor at Waubonsee Community College, and she said she was having suicide ideation. She gave permission for me to meet her at the hospital, and that was our journey. We've been on it almost 12 years. Like many families, we have navigated complex systems before understanding that she was living with bipolar disorder. And just recently this year, her diagnosis changed. She has bipolar, but she also has some moments of some psychosis. So they haven't changed it completely, but she's had more than 2 episodes. NAMI became a lifeline for me and my family, offering education, support, and a reminder that we're not alone. Professionally, I spent 20 years in education and the early childhood systems. I was a special ed teacher for about 5 years, and I worked for Head Start for 22 years, and I retired during COVID. During COVID, I started volunteering at our local NAMI, and I became the executive director of Kane, DeKalb, and Kendall County. I did that for 4 years, and I just finished my first year with NAMI, Illinois. So this work is personal. It's what families navigate every day, and it's why it matters so deeply to me. So this is Emily Fagan. She leads our statewide training, youth programming, and expanding access and innovation across Illinois. One of the programs that we are designing this year, which we're really super excited about, is Superpower Strategies. And it is grade 3 through 5th. It's a curriculum focused on early skilled building. It teaches emotional resilience, practical coping skills, and how to ask for help. It's interactive and age appropriate. It gives students the tools and confidence to navigate challenges early when it matters most. The data is clear. When we intervene early, we see stronger outcomes, healthier development, and better long-term outcomes for our young people. We are going to pilot this in Southern Illinois in the fall is the plan. Well, it is not, I don't know what's going on. So let me see here. Let me try here. There we go.
Right.
We piloted this program last year. It's called Mental Health Mentors. And we did this program in Austin and Chicago. So the first pitcher is Ashley Warren. She's our executive director of programs. The second pitcher is Eric Metcalf. He's the director of peer workforce development for NAMI DePage. And Stephanie Steele is LCSW school social worker in the Chicago Public Schools. We went in every Wednesday. We had lunch together. We had invited mental health professionals that looked like the community in which Austin is. And it was very successful. Due to the success, we expanded to East St. Louis this year, and it's happening right now. And we're scaling intentionally to reach underserved communities. So we're really excited about that program. So youth leadership focus. This slide reflects what we're doing, what youth are leading. We're not just creating programs for youth. They are creating spaces where they speak, lead, and shape the conversations. Through initiatives like NAMI on Campus and Next Gen Minds, youth are sharing their stories, building connections, and influencing advocacy and policy. The goal is simple, not to speak to young people, but to equip them to speak for themselves, and they are ready. This is our Next Gen Minds Youth Advocacy Board, and this was at our state conference last year. Next Gen Minds builds youth leadership across Illinois through age-based cohorts. It's not just programming platform for youth to shape priorities and lead. Initiatives like Grabbing the Aux, Amplify Youth Voices, and Normalize Mental Health Conversation. We are building with the youth, not for them. And I'm really excited to introduce Tony Alhausen, our Director of Research and Policy, who leads our advocacy work across the state, working directly with legislators to drive real change. These photos show that work in action from NAMI Hill in Washington, D.C. to our state capitol in Springfield. This is Tony and I just this week. Tony is going to close us out by sharing how we're bringing youth into the advocacy and helping them lead.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. And you read my mind going to the next slide already. So, I want to talk just briefly about kind of how we engage youth in our advocacy and how we build some of that, build that leadership in our youth or with our youth that we're engaging with, as well as talk a little bit about what we do in our youth advocacy or advocating on behalf of youth, and then bringing them into the fold. So, when we talk about youth leadership in NAMI, Sarah talked a little bit about some of the programs that we have to kind of bring those youth in, give them their space to have those discussions with other youth and bring us into us as staff and kind of the quote unquote professionals into the fold when they're ready for that, because we know that the youth that we work with and youth in general, a lot of times know what they need, they know what they want, they know what they see, and they know what their experience is and how they experience daily life and their thoughts and emotions. Maybe they might not have the words or the language or the skills to talk about all of the things that they're experiencing, but this is how we can help them go from what they see and what they're experiencing to, here's the broader perspective of what legislation looks like, why certain schools are making certain decisions or doing things, and figuring out where there's a disconnect, right? So our role is to then, have these conversations with our youth leaders, give them the skills to talk about, what it means for them to be advocates and what it means for them to be leaders. We want to give them the confidence and the platform to do that. And one of our programs that we do that is NAMI Smarts for Advocacy. So it's not necessarily a youth focused or a youth specific program, but that's our advocacy storytelling workshop that we do. So I'm one of our facilitators. Emily is our other facilitator at NAMI Illinois. And just this month, we expanded to having a total of 10 facilitators for this program across the state, which is up from one last year. So we're doing a really great job of expanding that program. That's a program that I coordinate in the state. And it's one of our national programs that's coordinated at the national level by our policy team. So we utilize that program along with our Next Gen Minds and our other youth focused programming to do all of this. So once we kind of give the skills, we need to find that platform for our youth, right? So this year we've got our Advocacy Day on April 15th. And our goal for that Advocacy Day is to bring our local leaders, youth and adults, and young adults, everyone in our community to Springfield to share their perspective, their expertise, and make sure that our legislators here in Illinois know that our communities are watching what they're doing, and mental health is something that they need to be spending their time. So this year we got a grant from our national NAMI that will be able to fund us to bring over 20 youth from across the state from our Next Gen Minds and NAMI on Campus programs down with us to Springfield to come talk with their legislators and commune with other behavioral health advocates. So we're really excited about that. This is our third year doing a big advocacy day. This year was much larger than our previous years, and our first year that we're able to help fund getting our youth down to Springfield. With our advocacy day, we've got a whole range of behavioral health advocates. We're partnering with providers and our trade organization partners, other community groups and organizations, and we'll have individuals and families with lived experience there as well. So that was my last slide in that deck. But I do want to just touch on very briefly kind of our legislative agenda for this year. A couple of our bills have been mentioned already, but one bill that we have is HB 2960 that would expand mental health education in public schools. This bill is an example of one of our, what we're able to do when we listen to our youth leaders and give them the tools that they need to do what they want to do. This bill was originally written by two high schoolers that you saw, or that are part of our Next Gen Minds, I think, and spoke at our conference in the fall. And they really, are hungry. Our youth leaders are hungry for mental health education, and so they wanted to create a law that really formalized and standardized what it means for a public K-12 school to offer mental health education, and that's what that bill does. We talked a lot tonight about social media and the impact on children. The governor's office and the governor and his state of the state mentioned this bill, but HB 5511 would put some guardrails on social media for what or how algorithms are able to be tailored towards children, what children are allowed to kind of have come up in there, or what types of things are allowed to come up in children's social media feeds, and or putting some parameters around that for these large social media companies. And that's partially based on federal legislation that's sponsored, I'm sorry, not sponsored, but supported by NAMI nationally. And then we've heard about this new social media tax as well. We're trying to that money is really being raised at the end of the day as a budget gap filler for the state. The state's budget is always a bit of a challenge, but as with other kind of quote unquote sin taxes, like we have taxes on gambling and alcohol, tobacco, these kinds of things, that a portion of those funds go back into either public awareness or public education and treatment for the negative side effects of those things. I think it'd be wonderful to see a set aside 5% of that $200 million social media tax be specifically set aside for mental health education and support. So with that, I think I've probably gone over our time a little bit, but so hopefully that's okay. But happy to answer any questions, and would love to have folks come down on the 15th to Springfield with us. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, I think, Catherine.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. Thank you all for all of your presentations. And we'll have some time at the end. We'll keep the Zoom room open if people want to chat and ask more questions and share resources. But yeah, again, thank you to Tina Samuel, Nicole Davidson, and Tony Olhausen and Sarah Gray. And also to our partners, Children's Advocates for Change, Dr. Tasha Green-Crusat and Dr. Amani Pittman. You all were amazing in your presentations. This was very informative, and I learned a lot and felt like I've learned how to be a better advocate for children. So thank you all. And also thanks to our UVC board members who are here tonight and who helped prepare and plan this presentation and collaborate with our partners so that we could all learn together tonight. And importantly, thank you to all of you who signed up to participate in this event tonight and to learn more and take a little bit of time out of your day so that we can grow our heart for kids and be more courageous and insightful. I'm gonna hand it over to Dr. Tasha Green-Crusat for the concluding words here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Abby. As we close today, let's just be very clear. A policy is only as good as the people standing behind it. And the true engine of our work is a historic partnership that we have with United Voices for Children and our other partners that are here today. Separately, we're all experts and we're advocates, but together we are an undeniable force ensuring that any child facing mental health challenges are met with the resources and the support that they need. So thank you for your partnerships, and let's get to work.